Welcome to the EJF Board Learning Series. Thank you for making the time to come and join us for this live special session. I am Sarah Keller, Director of Community Managers at EJF Real Estate. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Jane Rogers, Ed O'Connell, and Ellen Maroney from the law firm of Whiteford, Taylor & Preston. Today our speakers will be diving into the topic of how to tackle the most challenging board issues. There will be a question and answer portion at the end of this presentation. Post-webinar, we will be circulating the recording and slides to all board members via email. Without further ado, I will now turn it over to Jane.
Actually, it's going to be Ed.
Okay.
Ed, I'll turn it over to Ed, even better.
Well, Sarah, thank you. As Sarah mentioned, we were talking about common challenges boards face and how to navigate them. And we're going to focus on several topics. Next slide, please. Today's presentation is going to focus on some of those common challenges and the tools of the trade. Board leadership, we're going to talk about the governing documents, the importance of those documents, as well as applicable laws. We're talking about the use of experts, resolutions, communicating board decisions, and finally, the role of committees in this process. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jane. Jane?
Good afternoon, everyone. So this past year, in my experience, has been an incredibly challenging one for many of our communities, no matter what kind, whether it's an HOA, a cooperative, a condominium association, and in whatever jurisdiction. There's some common themes that we're seeing our boards facing that are extraordinarily challenging. Some of those, for example, in some of the older buildings, deferred maintenance obligations have reared their ugly head and become an extremely difficult problem for boards to navigate. Everyone is experiencing rocketing insurance rates. And those rate increases, which are almost universally outside of the ability of the association to control, because their market forces are driving many of those rates. So even if you have a very low loss experience in your building, you're still getting these late rate increases. When those rate increases are directly related to your own internal maintenance problems, it makes it even more challenging. We have lender concerns. Lenders are looking, whether it's a lender for your building or your unit owners lenders, they're universally examining things in the building and requesting specifics regarding maintenance and other tasks that it believes the board should be undertaking. In the District of Columbia and Maryland, we have the BEPS standards, your energy efficiency standards, that have been a major challenge for boards. Most communities have gotten beyond the initial hurdles there, but they have been an extraordinary challenge for communities to, number one, respond to the record keeping requirements, and then secondarily, actually make the changes that are needed to make their buildings run more efficiently. And behind all of this, the bottom line, all of this is money. It costs so much to comply with all these varying standards that are coming at the boards from all different directions. And that has really placed an extraordinary burden on our boards that we just really haven't seen to this extent in the past. So the money pressure is always going to cause the board to have to refocus its efforts and determine the best way to honor its fiduciary duty and to bring and make the best decisions regarding all of the items that it has to address. So the first steps in addressing a challenge like this first is to have a strong and effective board. And we'll talk more about some of the ways you can do that. We can't cover the gamut of all the issues that like a board training like we do for many of our clients today, but we're going to touch on some of the issues that we think help to make your decision-making process work more smoothly. We're going to talk about the importance of knowing what your governing documents say. who's responsible for what maintenance obligation, how you're going to be able to finance, what your documents say about financing, special assessments, all kinds of things that are going to be determinative of the course of action that the board is able to take on any particular large project or financial challenge. We'll talk about expert advice when that's necessary and the kinds of experts who may be able to help on addressing each of these issues. And then we're going to talk about the importance of documenting whatever decisions are made by the board, making sure you have a proper record of policies and procedures that the board implements. And finally, how to best use committees to assist you when those crunch periods come. How can those committees be effective in helping you on an ongoing basis? And some ideas on working with committee structure. So first, talking about a strong and effective board is probably I could spend hours on this. In fact, do with some of my clients. As I said, in this past year, I have more than ever before had to really work with some of my clients on that decision-making process and how they can get through the challenge that they're facing. Obviously, we provide advice about what the documents say when there's some ambiguity, and provide advice regarding, those specific legal issues. But more and more, I'm finding myself providing advice to boards on again, just how they can effectively make these decisions. And it's a challenge. Whether you're a new board member or someone who has served on a board for many years, we know that you're all there for the right reasons. You're there to really look out for your own, preserve your personal financial interests in the community. You're there to make the community better, to do a good job, to make your home a wonderful place, and make sure that your fellow members of the community are happy with the direction that the community is going in terms of addressing its challenges. So one important part of each board is making sure that every member of the board has an opportunity and is encouraged to participate in the decision-making process. Every single member of a board, whether they're the new guy who has never participated before and knows nothing about board service, or the experienced board member who's done this for 10 years and knows all the ins and outs of your community, every board member, even that new guy on the block, brings the unique perspective to the table. And as a board leader, it's important to provide adequate time to make sure that all of those voices are heard, particularly when you're facing a challenging issue. So we really encourage that you follow the process and handle your challenging issues in a very organized, methodic way. You're going to have periods where you're just going to be discussing your approach. How are we going to undertake this huge renovation project that we have to do to respond to the concerns of outside forces? How are we going to, what kind of contractors are we going to consider? What kind of experts do we need? What are the approaches we need to take? And some of it is organizational. Before you actually make the hard decisions on financing, on costs, on contractor selection, on all the aspects that may come into play to meet the particular challenge that your board is facing, we think that being very methodical about your approach, going into it, do you have clarity about what the governing documents say about the process you're going through? What have you identified the experts that you need to bring to the table to inform your decisions and help you make sure that whatever decisions you make serve the best interests of the association, that you are always meeting your fiduciary duty to the rest of the community. So whenever you have, again, these important issues, really follow the process. Put a motion on the floor, get a second to that motion, and then during discussions you're having regarding whatever the issue is you have to decide. I've found an amazing transformation in some of my boards that were not as sort of formulaic in the way they did business. But I had a new board member in an association that was facing incredible challenges. And the new board president took over, and he had never been on a board before. He had no experience with the board for this particular community. But once he got into the process, I saw this incredible rhythm and an incredible leadership take place. And what he would do is when they got that discussion period, so you have the motion, somebody has seconded the motion, and the board is making its decisions, and people would pipe up, the people who usually talk about it, the people who have served on the board before were piping up and saying, well, I'm concerned about this, or expressing their views on that particular issue. But what this board president did is he stopped and he went, well, wait a minute, Susie, we haven't heard from you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this motion and on this proposition. And he went around the room and made sure everyone's voice was heard. And that is very important because in every board dynamic, there's going to be certain people who are more vocal on issues about which they may have a great deal of experience. But sometimes that other guy who's not been around so long really has an opinion and a perspective on the issue that needs to be heard. So respecting and hearing all the voices on your board, I think, is an important leadership choice and one you need to be thinking about and will help you make good decisions. So after everyone is heard and they've had a chance to weigh in, it's an appropriate time to vote. And then when you vote, having heard everybody's views, all the members of the board, whether they're in the majority on whatever the decision is you've made or not, it's much easier for them to support the decision that is made by the majority. And it also reflects an incredible, it promotes respect in your community. If you have an open board meeting and you're making decisions in this open forum, then the rest of the community sees that everyone is being heard on these issues. And so they respect the process the board has followed, and you're going to get more community support behind whatever tough decision you've had to make. So encouraging active participation by all board members, because there's so much work to go around. The one or two of you who do most of the work, need to share. Make sure that you encourage that active participation, get people involved, hear their voices, and I think you're going to be much more successful. So behind all of this is taking a team approach to every decision. And some of that may be that you're having a board meeting and you are flopping around and not able to make a decision. So part of that is other board members recognizing that you're reaching a point where you just don't have enough information, where you're not ready to make a decision, and you may have to postpone it while additional information is obtained from, whether it's from an expert, a financial, of any sort. That could be an engineer, it could be a financial advisor, whoever that is. It may be that other members of the board need to step in and say, hey, Joe, I think we're stuck here. Maybe we need to reach out and get this following additional information before we move forward on this particular decision. This is a huge impact on our community. So let's push pause. Maybe we need to schedule a special meeting. Just look at other steps. And every member of the board needs to be able to weigh in and be a positive force in moving, in the decision-making process. Listening to everyone, again, even when they're expressing reservations about the direction you're going, it's very important to hear what the basis is for those reservations. And with your community, you want to manage, first of all, you want to show your community that you are strong leaders by listening, by working collaboratively. But you need to manage the expectations of your community. You need to for everyone in the community to recognize that this is a really tough choice. And, you as a member of the community are going to have to pay your fair share of whatever expenditure that may be involved in this decision. And so but you're doing the best you can, and the tough situation is often the case. You don't like this, it's gonna cost you money too, but you have to make a decision, you have to solve this problem, so very important to show that your viewpoint on that. Again, ask for advice, provide feedback, accept the feedback and the criticism that you may get from not just fellow board members, but members of the community. They're going to not be happy if you have a lot of expenses that have to be shared by all the members of your community. So you need to be prepared to accept the fact that whatever decision you have to make may not be the most popular one, but it's a necessary one. And by going through your decision-making process in the open with all the proper elements of advice, the expert advice, all the input put together before you make that decision, and allowing your members of your community to view you during that decision-making process, I think really inspires confidence that you really are doing a thorough job. You have done your fiduciary duty by gathering all the points of information you need before you make your decision. You've heard all the views on the board. When you have open session and you're listening to the feedback that you've gotten from the community, you are going to, you've put it all together and you're making the best decision possible given all the information you've been able to assemble before you made your decision. That, I think, is what that positive leadership role will convey to the community, and the community be very supportive of the decisions that you finally have to make.
And a few other formulas for board success, specifically addressing the most common issues that we see. The board should commit to proactive maintenance. This will help with deferred maintenance costs both now and in the future if the board starts to address common issues like HVAC maintenance now. When boards set rules, like for unit owners to yearly look at their HVAC units to make sure they're in proper working order, the board needs to be consistent and reasonable with their rule enforcement and ensure that all members, all association people are following the rules. The board should approach issues with a sense of honest openness and reasonableness. They know that these issues are hard. The board members should be ready to listen to all opinions, to think about it, to make a good decision. Unfortunately, these hard issues are going to have criticism no matter what decision is made. There is no easy right answer for the board. It might be costly, it might upset some people, but the board has to be ready to stick by their decision. And then finally, with a CAI quote, association leaders and residents should be reasonable, flexible, and open to the possibility and benefits of compromise, especially when faced with divergent views. It's very important for association leaders to know the governing documents of the association so that they can adhere to the governing documents and abide by all applicable laws. The governing documents of most associations are the declaration, bylaws, any rules and regulations, the articles of incorporation if the association is incorporated, proprietary documents if the association is a cooperative, and any applicable state laws. The board needs to know the governing documents because most of them will answer their questions regarding financing, assessments, liability for repairs, whether it's the unit owner's obligation to repair or it's the board's obligation, who will pay for those repairs, whether it's the unit owner or the board. However, some of the governing documents may not be clear. A lot of times the governing documents are written by the declarant, by the builders that don't necessarily know the laws, and they might conflict. If the board members cannot find the answers, you can reach out to your management professionals or legal counsel to assist with those. We do it every day. Management has tons of experience. They know most of the answers, but in case they don't, legal's also here to help. And it's vitally important to get those answers and to know what the governing documents say before making the important decisions.
So experts are very, very important, especially with some of the difficult issues that Jane has mentioned and Ellen just enumerated on it as you discussed the governing documents. I'm a big believer that you need to use your experts effectively. John Wooden once said, the famous basketball coach, whatever you do in life, Surround yourself with smart people who will argue with you. And that's what you need to do. And the key to this is going to be your management professionals. They're there in the trenches with you. They're handling the day-to-day operations. They know your finances. They've seen these issues before, and they can help you work through and navigate these difficult tasks. I'll give you an example of how a management team came into effect in a very, very difficult situation. We had a situation in Virginia 3 years ago where we had a near collapse of part of a building. It was by fluke that the manager discovered that there was a little hole in the cement of one of the support beams outside, and we discovered all 12 support beams holding up 10 units had holes in the size of grapefruit. So we had to move quickly. And so the management team jumped in and they brought the professionals into place. Council came in and we helped navigate the issues with the city on the various issues to get the building, actually that part of the building condemned. We've brought in the engineering experts to find a way to fix the problem and then bring in the right construction professionals to help solve the problem of shutting down part of the building, dealing with the owners that were in a difficult position. And the management team of this team came up with a great idea here. Knowing that the pressure on the manager, the on-site manager and the portfolio manager and dealing with all these issues, plus the other issues they had to deal with, they brought in another member of the management company who simply handled communications with the owners and with the board of directors. And the manager went back and forth with the engineers, the construction teams, and he was the conduit of all information through the process. And we found that to be a great thing. So use your experts effectively. And what was good about this management team in place was they were willing to argue with the board and say, look, you can do this, but you can't do this. And as you can imagine, it was a very, very difficult position. And so they got through that process. And just when you thought they were out of the woods, they got their new reserve study. It had been updated in 2023. The last one had been in 2019. So as you can imagine what inflation did to that, their numbers went through the ceiling. And they had just spent $1 million fixing something they hadn't planned on doing. So what to do next? Again, managers came up with a great idea. Knowing the changes in Virginia law, what we could do is they sought out a loan and they were able to obtain a loan for the costs they expended on the repair of the building to allow them to move forward with the other repairs that were scheduled because the deferred maintenance had been an issue. This building was 60 years old. So it's a combination of finding the right people in place to help the board navigate these difficult issues was very, very important. So don't be afraid to use them. They can be very effective and it becomes a team approach with the board leading the team, but your manager is truly the person pulling the strings behind it. They're taking the steps to find those solutions for you and work with the board so that you can make the decisions going forward. So use your experts effectively. I think you'll find it can be very, very helpful. And don't be afraid to seek out expert advice from experts that you wouldn't ordinarily go to. Yes, you know your attorneys, you know your financial advisors, your engineers and insurance professionals, but there may be other issues you have to deal with communications, things like that, that you're not prepared to do. So seek that advice where you need it. Don't be afraid to ask for it. And that will help you navigate these difficult challenges. Next slide. So we've talked about experts, we've talked about governing documents. Ellen talked about the importance of having clear and distinct policies. Well, this is where this comes into place. Your resolutions are going to be very, very important because as it says on the slide, a resolution is a written document adopted by a board detailing specific association actions and policies. These are essential for establishing the record of important decisions and policies being implemented by the board. So in the cases we just discussed with the difficulties of deferred maintenance and skyrocketing insurance costs, special assessments and financing become a very, very important, effective resolutions become very, very important. I have a situation right now with a client that has skyrocketing insurance costs. They're in property, their physical damage insurance, because it's an older building, went up by 450% in 1 year. So you can imagine they hadn't budgeted for that. So what we were able to do is bring in the experts we just talked about, come up with an assessment model that made sense, that while it still was difficult for owners to deal with, they were able to move forward. We did not see a spike in collections or anything like that when people were getting faced with a resolution of about 400% over their original assessment costs, just to help balance it out, the costs that they needed to maintain the facilities. Whereas these are important. So we laid it out in a resolution, and it's important these resolutions be written in a manner, I will tell you, I use what I call the high school graduate rule. Anyone who's graduated from high school should be able to read a resolution and understand what it says. If your lawyers are preparing and haven't done it, then they're not meeting their obligations to you. The idea is you want a simple, straightforward resolution that's clear and concise and explains things. As Ellen mentioned earlier, the proactive maintenance is another important. We're finding that is a very effective tool for associations to pursue with the deferred maintenance issues. If you have the situation with the constant leaks, it's the defaulting HVAC systems, it's leaks in the hot water tanks, things along those lines. Come up with these maintenance resolutions, work with your attorneys and your management teams to find a path forward that makes sense for you. And there's different approaches you can take, and your documents will control what you can and can't do, but take those steps. That way you can deal with proactive maintenance. Same with damage and repair with insurance, know what the obligations are. We're seeing a lot of associations have amended their documents where they're putting more obligations on the unit owners that have been in the past, with the idea being, so we know that's going to take place. How are you going to implement it? How are you going to handle it? If you have those policies and procedures in place, it makes your life easier, it makes management's life easier, and it helps to control costs because you have a plan in place to deal with these situations. We're also seeing new things that you're going to have to deal with as part of these issues. The electric vehicle charging, DC has a new statute. Virginia's already had electric vehicle charging. But the importance here is, how are you going to deal with it? What steps are you going to have to take so that the owners understand what the association can and can't do? And finally, collections. It's important to keep that up to date with all these situations. As Jane said, it's all about the money. And the only source of income you truly have are the assessments paid by your owners and members. Bottom line is this: put together those resolutions and get them out so people understand what their obligations are. The idea being they want to understand what things are going to cost and how things are going to happen. Next slide.
Another tool boards can use is committees. Committees can help the board with the hard decisions, especially something like financing. A finance committee is very, very common. This can help the board because it divides up the labor a little bit. It doesn't put as much pressure on the board who has all the other decisions to make too. It's getting more input from the community. This also assists because many members of the community might be finance professionals. They might have extra experience that the board doesn't have that can add to the decision and help make this decision ultimately. Committees are advisory only unless the governing documents provide otherwise, like an architectural review board might be required by the governing documents. But a committee that's made for a specific purpose would be advisory only. The board should use these with caution because sometimes committees can get a little bit, I don't want to say out of control, but they tend to think that they are the decision makers and they are more powerful than the board. So committees should be limited in size and scope. If a committee is made for a specific purpose, ensure that that committee focuses on that specific purpose, like finance, and only has a certain number of members to it. They don't necessarily want all members in an association all putting the opinions together to make these difficult decisions. And to ensure that the board is still connected to these committees, a board liaison should be appointed so that the board knows what's happening in each of the committees, what discussions are being had, and kind of making sure they're going in the correct direction.
So types of committees, as Ellen just mentioned, there's always the architectural review committee. Most POAs and HOAs have an architectural review committee or an architectural review board, and they have certain defined authorities. The other types of committees we see that can be very effective, especially in dealing with some of these issues, is a finance committee. They can help with the preparation of the budget. Again, your management professionals will be the person leading that for you. They have the expertise, but nevertheless, as Ellen just mentioned, you have a certain level of expertise within your community. So tap on that, bring them into play. And it doesn't have to be a full finance committee. You can define the terms of what that finance committee can do. Are they going to just help advise in the budget? Are they going to look at the reserves and see what they think needs to be done going forward? So you you as a board will make that decision. But Ellen's right, they're advisory. They're not there to dictate policy. They're there to help you. If they're not helping you, then don't use it. Buildings and Grounds Committee is also another effective community thing, especially for your larger POAs or your condominiums that have a number of issues. Let them know what's going on, get them involved, get them advising you as to issues that they're seeing within the community and working with the management team to come up with solutions for problems that they see. They should be advisors. It's also a great way to recruit future board members, bring them into play, let them understand what the needs, the physical needs of the community are, so that you can then make sound decisions going forward when you get those reserve studies that are updates. Safety and security is becoming another big issue with these issues. The issue I mentioned earlier with respect to the collapsed building, we had to bring a fire watch in along those lines, and they reported to a ad hoc committee we formed just to make sure that people were staying out of the condemned areas of the building. But we also have these committees now looking at things like lighting, things to improve things on the property. Again, they're advisory in place, but it's helpful to do that. And that's why, as Ellen mentioned, we want to have a liaison. Lastly, a rules and regulations committee. Again, it's getting owners involved, letting them participate, taking a look at the rules and regulations for the community to see what works best, especially given these situations you're having. We're having to spend a lot of money. What works, what doesn't work. Let these committees help you to the extent they can. And they don't have to be full, they can be short-term committees, by the way. They can be ad hoc committees for specific projects too. It's not just this. It's you as a board determining what works best for you and how can they help in dealing with issues of deferred maintenance, skyrocketing costs, lender concerns. I've got one, for example, we just formed an ad hoc committee because the condominium found themselves on the so-called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac blacklist. So we're working through that issue right now. And we brought in some people that have backgrounds in real estate as well as finance and maintenance to come together. The association in this case is also bringing in an engineer to help address those issues. And working all three, this working group is going to help prepare a proposal to the board as the best way to proceed with, in this case, the management team's leading that committee because they have the experience, they know the property. So it's bringing all that together in a way that makes sense. So just thinking a little bit outside the box to find solutions that will help you as a board. Because one of the things I would tell you, and I'm sure Jane and Ellen would echo this, is you all are volunteers. And the world needs to recognize that. You give of your time and your energy to help the association. You're not paid. You're taking time away from your family, your friends, your professional and personal life. So we should provide the tools to help you make those decisions in conjunction with your management team to find the best solution forward. So this is it. This in a nutshell. I know lawyers are often long-winded, but we finished this in 35 minutes. So we've left that open for time for questions from all of you. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. We do have a few questions already in the chat, so we will start off with those. If you would like to provide another question, you're welcome to raise your hand. So we have somebody anonymous. What can board members say to the community when shareholders or other board members appear skeptical of expert and legal guidance?
Jane, you want to take it or would you like me to take that?
Really, the board needs to be able to rely upon the experts that it is engaged. The board is the decision maker. And if the board agrees that some of the advice that it has received, there's some legitimacy to the concern being raised, then it certainly has the discretion to reach out and look for a second opinion. But the vast majority of the time that I've encountered this kind of skepticism, it's often based on not a full understanding of the scope of the problem. So usually the initial advice is correct, but the person who is skeptical about the advice being provided doesn't really have the background information to evaluate that. So it may just need to be that you need to go back to whoever's provided the advice, whether that's an engineer, an architect, an attorney, and ask them to restate it or provide clarification, and that may well address the issue.
And if I could just add to that, what Jen said, I agree with everything she just said. Here's where listening comes into play, though. Take the time to listen to what the person's saying. You don't have to agree with it. As Shane says, check it out, but they want to be heard. So to the extent you can hear them. And that will help gain support for the board within the community, especially when you're dealing with these difficult issues.
And if I also may just tag on, I can say from experience, it's extremely helpful to invite a professional to an open board meeting to answer questions depending on how challenging the situation might be or complex. Because not everybody knows the exact background of those specific situations or is very familiar with. I mean, I know a lot of lawyers, but not everyone's an attorney that works specifically for associations, and lots of engineers, but doesn't mean they are specifically familiar with the specific mechanical equipment in your individual community. So having them come to the table and speak directly to the community can help cut that out. However, on the other side, there is typically a charge for their time, but it is worth it if it gets the association moving forward. Okay, I have another one. How do you advise board members to deal with a chair who doesn't consult with them and there are no term limits? That's a good one.
Well, I'll start. Board members are fiduciaries, so they need to take them to task, and that's often difficult to do. But the idea is you don't want one person running away with things because it typically leads to problems. So speak up and try to address the issue. You can do it politely and quietly beginning. You can actually, in many cases, go into executive session under so-called personnel issues. But you as board members are fiduciaries and you've got an obligation to address those type of issues because what you're seeing, the members are also seeing. And it just breaks down confidence within the community. And I know that's often difficult to do.
Ellen, Jane, you have anything to add?
Not on that one, no.
Okay. Another one here. Our board is trying to develop policies and procedures to best enforce the rules and fines. What guidance can you give or provide on how the board should approach incorporating an effective hearing process into the enforcement process?
Well, this is where your experts come in, your management professionals, because they deal with this on a regular basis, and you bring in your legal team just to make sure you're in compliance with the current governing documents and the applicable laws in the jurisdiction where your property is located. The idea is, as I said earlier, with resolutions, they should be straightforward, concise, to the point so people understand them. But work with your management professionals and your legal team to develop those. Because I will tell you, the courts are getting much more strict on how things are done and what policies are in place. And your failure to comply can be very costly for you from an expense point if a judge were to overturn what you've done. So take the time to work with your legal team and your management professionals to develop those policies.
And I might add too that the laws are different in each jurisdiction. So, you know, what applies in Maryland, what would not be the same, it would be different in Virginia. And the District of Columbia has been a jurisdiction that has been not as restrictive in terms of the process that the board needs to follow in terms of its rules, implementation of its rules. But increasingly that is not the case. And I have to remind boards in the District of Columbia all the time that, you know, the act does require, for example, the opportunity for a hearing whenever a violation fee is being imposed for a rules violation. I mean, in Virginia, there's a very strict schedule and a process to follow. But that has not been true in the district in the past, but there is that requirement. And so we have to remind our boards, and the board needs to just, you get that advice up front from your management professional or from your legal team, and get yourselves on a path, know that you're doing it right, so you don't get tripped up with a unit owner who contests the process that you've been following. You just may need to make sure to get it right to start with.
All very excellent points. Also a very hot topic lately With small condos where 1/3 of owners are non-resident, pool of potential board members is small. Ergo, same 3 to 4 people serve on the board year after year. Your thoughts on how to pull in new board members?
That's a tough one. Just because it's gaining the interest there, finding a reason for them to get involved and help them get involved. I mean, we're facing this more and more where that small group has decided they've had enough. They don't want to do it. So it becomes very difficult to find new board members. What I'm going to suggest is, to the extent you can, foster events to invite them in and just be honest with them. Let the other owners know, especially in these small condominiums, we need your help. We can't keep doing this. And the condominium needs to survive, and we need an effective board to do so. Jane or Ellen, have you seen any things recently?
What I've seen is that some boards, the participation in the board has been negatively impacted by individuals within the community who are engaging in behavior that's inappropriate. And so they're reacting. You can be thick-skinned as a board member. You can really build up that skill of understanding that people are going to be critical, but of decisions that you're making. But some board members have, people don't want to serve because it is a thankless job. Number one, it takes a lot of time. And so having town hall meetings to try to explain the issues, involve the rest of the community, get their input in that way. And also I'm having to prepare a lot of civility resolutions and to encourage the boards to enforce those civility resolutions. In other words, we need to all be nice to each other because we're all here for the same reason. We want to do the best job. We want to be good, effective board members, providing value to the community, honoring our fiduciary duty, and doing the best job we can because we're affected. We are members of this community and we have the economic impact hits us as well as the rest of you. We're doing the best job we can. So trying to foster sort of a community spirit about the goals of the board, stating what the goals are, and really getting a community spirit by having town hall meetings, being very open and communicative. I find that increasing communication to the community in a very positive manner often improves the willingness of people to serve on the board. They see the positive impact the board is having. And by again, increasing communication instead of decreasing it is going to improve the prospects of new board participation and improves respect for the job and the kind of role that they'll be able to play on the board.
Very well said. The civil pledge is amazing. I've also, as a community manager, I do have a portfolio of my own. I manage 5 clients directly still, and something has changed since 2022 or 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic. So reminding people to be nice to each other, as well as just not tolerating that behavior in board meetings or public meetings. It is okay to shut down a conversation politely and firmly if it is going in the wrong direction. And it's very difficult to do that. That makes me uncomfortable personally. But at the same time, by doing so, you're setting an example for the community that this behavior is not okay, and that this is not the type of place to have such a discussion. Okay, I have more to share here. What can we do to manage insurance costs? Are there incentives which insurers recognize as something the association could do to manage risk on their property?
One of the first steps you can take is the proactive maintenance. We've seen in the past that's had some success, taking the steps to address the concerns expressed by the insurance companies and the underwriters, as actually the underwriters for the insurance companies, to see if there's a way to do that. I found that it's helped reduce some insurance costs or pull them more at bay, I should say. The present market, it makes it very difficult, but for keeping up with your maintenance, the effective maintenance program is one of the best things you can do, and it's something that's under your control in this marketplace, especially with those of you who are living in older communities and older buildings, so to speak. So I've found that to be very helpful. Jane?
In the District of Columbia, and I can't, although I'm admitted in all the local jurisdictions, this is really directed at District of Columbia buildings only because of the statutes in DC. I'm on the DC Legislative Action Committee for CAI, and the committee is going to be encouraging some legislation of modifications to the DC Condominium Act that will allow the board to shift more of the burden of the deductible expense to unit owners where a loss originates in a unit. And that is an effort that's underway this year with the DC Council. I don't know that we'll be successful, but it's something we're going to be working on. But boards can look at their bylaws, and I have had some really large buildings successfully amend their bylaws when the unit owners were explaining that the loss experience that building was having because of losses originating in units from people not maintaining stuff in their units was just costing all the unit owners a huge increase in insurance premiums. And so what they did, they adopted a bylaw amendment that, and you know, you have to have 2/3 majority, and for a big building, it's hard work to get that done, but they did because people realized that let's hold the people responsible for the loss responsible for the deductible. So the master deductible still came in. The master policy might still cover the loss, but the unit owner was responsible where it originated, who was the cause of the problem, was responsible for the deductible, and the costs of the insurance premiums to have an HO6 policy that covers that are relatively low. So it's really a cost shifting measure. So boards can consider that, particularly in the District of Columbia, to look at their insurance premiums. And I always advise you to go to your insurance professionals and seek their advice about measures that you can take. They often are very, very good at giving you some direction. They see the trends, they know what's going on in the industry, and they have incredible good ideas on what you can do. I have had success again with amending bylaws in the District of Columbia to shift only the deductible, only when the loss originates in the unit. But that's a tool that some buildings have been using to try to get a control over their total loss experience and therefore their overall costs. And in buildings in DC, we're seeing, I mean, most of the deductibles are as high as $50,000 for water losses. And some insurers are going to per unit deductibles, which are really a challenge. So this is a terribly important issue and one that we encourage you to, again, set a meeting with your insurance professional, review your coverage, get their advice on measures that can be taken from their perspective. Like Ed said, make sure that you're addressing those deferred maintenance issues that may be the underlying problem causing these losses. But then also look at your documents and see if there's anything you can do to make sure that unit owners are paying their fair share. I have worked with some buildings that were just going in and making repairs to instead of, for example, making an insurance claim because their rates are so high, they don't want to make new claims. And then they're just fixing things that actually they shouldn't be fixing to start with. It was a unit owner repair. So in other words, sometimes associations need to really step back, look at the whole picture, get advice from all their experts, management side, insurance side, legal side, and say, wait a minute, we can really cut down our loss experience and our insurance expenses by addressing each aspect of this, not making repairs out of pocket to avoid an increased insurance premium from claims experience when we weren't responsible for that loss to start with. Under our governing documents, it really is a unit owner thing they had to repair. Again, looking at what all these different factors to reduce your loss experience and hopefully get those insurance premiums under control. We can't control market forces, but we can at least control what's going on in our own building, our own community.
And if I may just add to what Jane said, I've had similar success in Virginia. Virginia is kind of unique in the local jurisdictions because we don't have mandatory insurance requirements for condominiums, with the exception of fidelity coverage or employee dishonesty coverage. So you have some more flexibility, whereas we also don't have deductible limits as we do in Maryland and DC as to how much you can pass through. So we've had a lot of success amending documents and forcing people to, and requiring that they then the amendments also include that they have to obtain HO6 coverage with certain types of coverage built into it to ensure that there's insurance behind the costs we're pushing on to those owners away from the association. And we have found that people are taking better care of their units, knowing that these expenses are now theirs.
One more thing on that, a great analysis, again, I had one particular client had an incredible tough time with loss experience. And it had to do with the age of the building. So say the building was 20 years old, I don't remember the exact numbers. And all the units were, have refrigerators with ice makers. That little line that brings the water to your ice maker has a life expectancy of 20 years. So they were having this huge tears being flooded by that little teeny hose, if you will, what you want to call it. That source of water was causing incredible problem in this building. So once the association recognized that was the source of the problem, then it adopted rules and regulations, which in DC it could do, saying you got to get it fixed. And you have to get it fixed by thus and such date, and because, or we're going to hold you fully responsible for the loss associated with the leak from these things. They were failing, routinely. So again, looking through and forcing preventive maintenance that will alleviate that source of loss is an important factor. But that's different for each community.
Mhm.
All right, that's quite a hot topic, and I personally feel a lot of that as a community manager. Getting your insurance agent and your attorney together when you're facing those significant increases is crucial. I did it a few years ago for a community that had a 40% increase, and their deductible was going from $10,000 to $50,000 for water loss. It's not that big of a community either, and we were able to. It's 2 years later, and their insurance costs have actually decreased as a result to